Dennis Shanahan is the Australian's national editor. Dennis, do you get a sense of deja vu when these leadership challenges come on? Do you wake up with a sense of dread that it might be happening today?
Yes, it is a bit like that. I've seen quite a few over the years, and this one has been a little bit different. It's tried to follow some of the usual rules, but then it hasn't. And a number of people have described it as being weird. There's not the sense of normal momentum. There's a lot of speculation a long way out, a lot of telegraphing well ahead of it, and really no action taken about it. And then in the end, when the resignation came, it took about 24 hours before the challenge was announced. So, yes, this has been different, but in some ways always the same about challenges. Someone has a go, and then you have a vote, and sometimes they get up and sometimes they don't. But generally, when you have a vote like this, a challenge against an incumbent leader, it turns into a problem for the person who wins, but also an ongoing problem for the party. We've seen this over the last 2 decades, where a challenge has occurred during the Gillard-Rudd years, absolutely polluted the standing of the Labor Party. And then we had the Turnbull, Abbott, Morrison leadership challenges. And so people get very tired of this because it looks like, and it is, the politicians only talking about themselves and their own futures.
We often talk about Anthony Albanese as a very adept tactical politician. He's shown time and time again that he knows how to play the kind of dirty game of politics. How much credit do you think he can take for the fall of Sussan Ley, or at the very least the big trouble the Liberals now find themselves in?
Yes, Claire. Look, I think the official political scientist term for Anthony Albanese's approach is called rat cunning. He understands everything. He has such a feel for insider politics. He has a great understanding of parliamentary institutions, and all of Sussan Ley's problems, that is the outside problems, not the ones she created herself, but they go back to Anthony Albanese manipulating the whole process of the emergency sitting of Parliament to consider the anti-Semitism and gun laws. It worked far better than he could have dreamed. He felt that he could at least put a wedge between the Nationals and the Liberals. Not only did he do that, he completely split the coalition. They became the story for 2 weeks. And now, as a result of that, the polls have plummeted, and Angus Taylor has actually now moved a challenge against Sussan Ley. So if she fails as the Liberal leader in the ballot, then we can thank, to a large degree, Anthony Albanese's rat cunning for that, as well as the split in the coalition.
I thought on Thursday morning that Angus Taylor has started to look almost like an AI-generated politician. You know, he's handsome, he's tanned, he's standing in a field, he's sort of saying all the right things, and he's very articulate. If he is elected leader on Friday, how well do you think he's going to go, at least getting his name known by the Australian public?
Well, that's his biggest problem. That is his biggest problem as far as the public is concerned. The other Conservative contender, Andrew Hastie, is much better known in the public. He has a much better message to cut through. His viral video with the old Ford Falcon there really worked for Andrew Hastie in putting him up in lights. Angus Taylor, although he has been a minister in the Morrison government, he has been shadow treasurer, still doesn't have the recognition level of either Sussan Ley or Andrew Hastie. Part of that is that he is very much a reserved person. His style is not to go out and perform, although we've seen over the last couple of days, as he's tried to appeal to the public, put out his own video with a haircut and standing under the trees, probably recorded beforehand, and also not a particularly good look when someone puts out a video saying what I stand for, because if you're a politician, you're running to be leader of the opposition, running to be leader of the Liberal Party and you're putting out a video saying what I stand for. I mean, this is like one time Kim Beazley stood under a placard saying what I stand for. I mean, this is not a good look, and it has a portent of a real difficulty with Angus Taylor in public, performing in media, and importantly in the Parliament, because part of Sussan Ley's problem has been her inability to cut through in Parliament. Part of her problem has been to get away from the dominance of Anthony Albanese and Tony Burke in the Parliament. And so Angus Taylor faces a real challenge in his personal presentation and his parliamentary presentation if he becomes leader. And this is part of his character, it's part of his personality, and it will be part of the problem he faces going forward if he is in fact the Liberal leader.
Yeah, the video contained absolutely nothing about what he does stand for, though. He said the phrase, but then he said that he stands for the great Australian dream and serving the Australian people and all stuff that any politician might say. What direction would he actually take the Liberal Party in, do you think, Dennis?
Well, I think this is, again, a shortcoming, and a lot of the video he did create was similar to Andrew Hastie's about, for values and so on, just what didn't have the impact because it didn't talk about any policy. This challenge is about polling and personality. It's not about policy. And all we have seen from Angus Taylor so far is to say that he's not Sussan Ley. And although Sussan Ley's a nice, courageous person, she can't lead the party, but he can. This is a real problem for somebody taking over one of the major parties as leader of the opposition. He's been in opposition for 9 months, and the Liberal Party is in dire straits. We can see that. He says it, and he says this is a moment where the Liberal Party it's a moment to die if they're not careful. And yet he doesn't have an alternative agenda, an alternative vision to the leader he is trying to remove.
Sussan Ley is, of course, the first female leader of the federal Liberal Party. And I've spoken to lots of Liberal women who, in the past few years, are pretty despairing about their prospects of ever kind of advancing in a party as, obviously, its popularity shrinks. It's harder and harder to get any seat at all, really hard to get into a winnable seat because you need to have done the work with pre-selection committees and branch meetings that often women haven't had the time to do because they're raising families, building careers, they're busy people, What do you think the fact that Sussan Ley has only lasted such a short amount of time says about the Liberal Party's attitude to women, or is it actually completely irrelevant?
Look, it's not completely irrelevant. And in fact, the Prime Minister in Parliament on Thursday made a great point about it, as did other ministers, saying, the Liberal Party doesn't treat women well. They don't have Liberal women in all levels of positions of power. It was all about trying to blacken Angus Taylor as being a misogynist who is undermining and trying to remove the first female federal Liberal leader. Now, that is all pertinent. I think that as far as the polls are concerned, as far as the draining of support in the polls and at branch level, from the Liberals and the Nationals to One Nation. And we have in the latest news poll, One Nation at 27% primary vote. This is a good 8 or 9 points above the coalition, making the coalition the third party on primary support. And this really doesn't have anything to do with the gender of Sussan Ley. It is about her own problems as leader, ineptitude in the House, and a lack of talent around her. One of the points here is after the devastating loss, the Liberal Party and the National Party have been reduced to their bare bones of talent, and a lot of the talent is in the Senate where it can't make an impact on the leadership and on the daily parliamentary attacks on the government. So I don't think it's irrelevant, but I don't think it is a major issue.
What do you think about the future of the coalition now, Dennis? We saw an embarrassing breakup and then a get back together, then a breakup again, and then they got back to get together again. That's only a few days ago, and it seems pretty fragile. Can Angus Taylor hold this coalition together better than Sussan Ley could?
Well, you have to give Sussan Ley credit because it's my view that the National Party was unrealistic in the way it went about. The first breakup, that we've had two, and then the second one was particularly bitter, with the National Party leader David Littleproud saying he couldn't work with Sussan Ley as the Liberal leader. Now, that's unprecedented, and it is not helpful for the Liberal leader. But I think for Angus Taylor, if he becomes leader, one technicality here is that agreement that Sussan Ley and David Littleproud signed only last week, which was, a great victory for Sussan Ley, and, David Littleproud saying, we've got this agreement, we can all work together, we've got the imperative of winning. That agreement has to be signed again because it's between the leaders. And now Angus Taylor has to go, and he can say, oh, well, I'm just going to tick this off and tick off the agreement that Sussan Ley won last week, or are the Nationals going to say, oh, we think we might have a bit more here? So the coalition is still on very thin ice and at the mercy of just having one or two National Party front benchers, and I know there are one or two who are not happy with that agreement that David Littleproud signed with Sussan Ley. And so the coalition could be right back where it was last week at the end of this week, or when Parliament resumes, when all the National Party members come back onto the front bench.
It's a very long way back to the lodge from where the coalition is now. It's probably going to be 2 elections at least. Is this a bad time to be getting the leadership, given that you're going to have to work very, very hard for not a lot of result for probably years on end, and then some glamour candidate might come in closer to victory time and you will have done it all for nothing?
Well, this is precisely the view of a lot of the Conservative supporters because, yes, the polling is terrible and it's probably going to get worse, particularly after another leadership challenge. So whoever becomes leader or is leader after the meeting on Friday, they will face further tough polling and a drop in the polls. There's no doubt about that. And for Angus Taylor, he will have had his shot, and if he's become leader, he can then face all of these difficulties we've talked about, a whole range of difficulties, much beyond just the change of leader. This isn't going to solve any of the Liberal Party's problems. And so what we will see will be a continuation of poor polling, a continuation of disaffection with the Liberal Party, divisions within the coalition, and the prospect that Andrew Hastie, the other Conservative, the frankly more popular, that is in the public's mind, candidate of Andrew Hastie, will then be able to drop in, as you say, the glamour candidate. Andrew Hastie is considered the glamour candidate, former SAS officer, good-looking, young family, lots of ideas, likes Ford Falcons. So there's a much greater prospect of Andrew Hastie coming in before the next election and removing Angus Taylor. This is a real possibility. And remember, Andrew Hastie's still young enough, he can hang around for the election after that. And so in the brief answer to your question is, it's not the best of times to become leader of the Liberal Party, but there are people who take the view that is, if you're the leader and you get the opportunity to be the leader, you take it, no matter when and no matter for how long.
It's a tough game. Dennis Shanahan, thank you very much.
Thank you, Claire.